Now, as a 501c3, the JCRC does not endorse or support any candidate for public office. However, these meetings are critical to fulfilling our mission to educate the Jewish community and promote civic participation. For those of you who may not know, along that lines, in about a week, the JCRC will be in coordination with the Washington Jewish Week, publishing a voter's guide for the first time in our history. There are 104 candidates running in Maryland, in Montgomery County and in Maryland, who are in contested races, and the overwhelming majority of them have responded. And we're going to be sending an electronic voter's guide, as well as the JCRC will be investing significant dollars in a nonpartisan get out the vote drive for the Jewish community. The first we've undertaken in about 5 years, and it should be quite extensive. The JCRC is the Chief Government and Community Relations Agency in our community, and we understand the importance of advocating for issues and funding that address not just our needs, but those of the entire region. And we consist of over 100 synagogues, day schools, and social service organizations. In addition to government relations, JCRC is focused on promoting social justice and intergroup relations, combating anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred, and supporting the state of Israel. Many of you know Hans. Hans has been finishing his third term now as a at-large member of the county council, where he served since 2010. He's got a very inspiring background as far as I'm concerned. Hans came to Washington, D.C. after graduating from college and founded a nonprofit youth advocacy organization, the 2030 Center to Save Social Security from Privatization. He then joined Rock the Vote. He guided political programs to register nearly 1 million young voters during the 2004 election cycle. And he's had a lot of other jobs, and this is probably his coolest one. In 2007, Hans joined the Obama campaign as the National Youth Vote Director, which must have been quite an amazing experience to look back on. His job was to mobilize student and youth organizers to what seemed an impossible dream: electing America's first African-American president. Next for Hans, he was a senior advisor at the AARP, managing retirement security campaigns, and then he was elected in 2010 to the Montgomery County Council, beating 3 incumbents at large. And I even remember Hans participating in our first debate when he ran for council back at the JCC in 2010. On the council, Hans has been committed to growth, a clean environment, sustainable energy, and livable communities. He's fought for housing policies that supported the diverse workforce, educational opportunities. He won victories for low-income workers, such as raising the earned income tax credit and the minimum wage. And he has a tremendous commitment to environmental energy, to reverse climate damage, including a plan to power the county with locally generated solar power. Hans, along with his wife and 2 absolutely adorable kids, live in Tacoma Park. And I just want to add that every candidate, I give a little commercial for how they've helped JCRC. There has never been a time in Hans's tenure during the council that I have asked him to please support an additional item for Jewish communal funding for one of our organizations, where he hasn't said, I'll do more than that. I'll take the lead on it. So, I just wanted to, give a kudos. I tell people where it is, and Hans has been a good friend, and we've always had a wonderful, warm, and open relationship. And with that, Hans, let me start the conversation with you for 10 or 15 minutes and ask you, why do you want to be county executive?
Thank you, Ron. Thank you so much. I really am so pleased to be here with you, and I want to thank each of you for taking some time from your morning to participate in some conversation, and I hope get to know a little bit more about me and have a chance to engage in some thoughtful discussion here around our shared priorities. And I want to thank you, Ron. First of all, you are always there at the middle of everything that matters so much in this county. And, every budget, every time there are significant challenges facing our community with food security, policy issues like aging and transportation, all of these critical goals. Ron Halber and the JCRC are at the center of it, whether that is delivering services to the community or leading through advocacy to help us see opportunities for this county to fulfill its mission and its goals. And it's a partnership that is so deep, and it matters so much to the county because we have limits as far as county government can reach. And it really is nonprofits and it's community-based organizations that get all the way to every corner of our community, and we need you. And for me, supporting our community-based organizations is an ethic, and it is how we achieve our goals. And so it is front and center in our strategy, and certainly personally for me. And I just appreciate the chances that you've given to me over the years to bring improvements to the community by bringing opportunities to us that we can deliver working with you. And I just want to say how much it has meant to me over the years.
Been an honor to work with you, and maybe to continue working with you.
Thank you, Ron. As you mentioned, I've got two kids in the schools, in public schools at MCPS. They're 14 and 11, and we'll have our first high schooler and our second middle schooler next year, and very much looking to that.
Look forward to middle school, trust me.
Yeah, glad we've gotten through with one, and hoping the second one will be as reasonably successful. And a lot of the reason I'm running for council, for county executive, is I'm concerned that this county is not creating enough opportunities for younger people, for the next generation. And I want all of our kids to have a future here. And I want to be a grandparent in Montgomery County. I want our grandkids to have a future here. And if that's going to be possible, we have to have more affordable housing. We have to have careers and jobs in the private sector as well as the public sector. We have to be a growing, sustainable community. And I worry a lot that the path we're on now is one of narrowing opportunities and less affordability and inclusivity. So very broadly, that is the goal and the vision of our campaign for county executive, is to help Montgomery County achieve its mission and create more opportunities and be a place that has a future for everyone and works for everyone, and not just the few. A few specific things I'd like to just mention. First of all, I think there are tremendous opportunities for Montgomery County to do more in economic development with countries around the world that are leading in sectors where we have strengths and where we have many residents with really strong ties. And I would like to explore a more formalized approach for economic development councils with countries where we have strong community bases like Israel, China, other countries that Montgomery County is really stands out for the community resources that we have and the opportunity to develop strong economic development partnerships. So
Hans, I don't know if you know this, but there's about, I think we're up to 32 or 33 Israel-based companies in Maryland, and over 2/3 of them, by the way, are in Montgomery County.
Fantastic.
And not necessarily, even though that, and because of our biotech and our scientific sector. That's the main reason.
Exactly. And I think, both countries are leading in those sectors, and Montgomery County is leading here. So we have lots of undeveloped opportunities to develop partnerships, and that's something I really would like to work on with the JCRC and figure out how we can create more opportunities here for Montgomery County residents. Second, nonprofits are, as I mentioned, at the core of what Montgomery County does. And I want to continue to build and strengthen on these partnerships. One of the things that really stands out for me from COVID is that when a crisis hits, it's too late to start building the community partnerships and structures that you need to respond in the moment. If you're trying to start from the beginning, you're not going to be prepared. You're not prepared for when you need it. And Montgomery County, I think, a lot of the success that we've had in our COVID response is because of the existing partnerships and support for nonprofits that the county provides. And I want to keep building on those because there's been a lot of innovation. There's been a lot of community groups that have devised new approaches and built new strengths, and we need to continue to invest in them because, first of all, COVID's not going anywhere, but secondly, it's just a better, stronger position for us to be in as a county. I'd like to thank you and the many members of the congregations in the county for the work that you're doing to help resettle Afghan refugees. I can't tell you how many times I have talked to someone in our county over the past month or two who is spending hours to find employment opportunities or housing opportunities, who's working in a food bank. And I know that many of you are at the center of that, and JCRC specifically. And I'm just grateful for those efforts because Montgomery County is a very expensive place. It's a place that has opportunities. And I think we're all proud to lead together.
You know, Hans, if I could just interrupt and tell you an interesting point about that. So our Jewish, because I like to make this, you know, in addition to a dialogue, in addition to you speaking, like a little bit of a dialogue, our Jewish Federation raised $800,000 in a week, which provided Lutheran Social Services, which is the State Department designated social service resettlement agency. There's 8 of them, and one of them is highest, and in each region of the country, the State Department gained it. So we gave them enough money that was like for about 2 months of their budget. And they were scaled back. They had almost no staff because under the Trump administration, all that was eliminated. And the other thing you should know that we're particularly proud of is that there's about 6 or 7 Jewish communities, including our own, that has hired a person who's on our staff now, Janice Rosenblatt, who used to be the executive director of Temple Beth Ami, who is working at JCRCs and working with all of our synagogues in Montgomery County that are taking on this tremendous humanitarian and, as we feel, Jewish obligation to help resettle these families. And you talk about affordable housing. Most of the synagogues that are helping are in Montgomery County, but most of the resettling is taking place in Prince George's County because housing prices are less expensive. So I just thought it was an interesting way to tie your affordable housing and your refugee resettlement together in sort of one basket.
You're absolutely right. And that's the conversation I've had with those who are engaged in trying to find affordable housing for refugees who are resettling. We're not able to find access here in Montgomery County. We're going to Prince George, we're going to Ellicott City, we're going, you know, far away, Frederick. And it's a very vivid example of the challenge that's facing our workforce and our kids and anyone. You know, if you want to move to this county to start a restaurant, you know, you're facing that same challenge. So thank you for the work that you're doing. We're all grateful for that. And I want to thank you for your partnerships on security. You know, Montgomery County has been, you know, not immune from acts of hate and anti-Semitism. And we have worked together at every instance to ensure that there is a strong community response, condemnation. And we need to continue to do that because there can be zero tolerance for expressions of hate, acts of violence. And we have to continue to work together until everyone understands it's not part of our culture. It's unacceptable. You can't do it. And, you know, create a more peaceful and secure community. And everyone should have the freedom to worship and to live their lives without threats of violence. And so Montgomery County has an important obligation to work with you and ensure that there's a strong community and police-based partnership so that you're safe and you feel safe when you worship, when you go to school, wherever it is. You know, the sense of personal security is one of the county's highest obligations. So I appreciate the chance to work with you in many different ways to achieve our shared goals. Finally, as I said when I opened, I'm worried that this county is not sustainable. And I think that's a macrocosm. A microcosm is each individual community, each individual congregation. Is there a progressive growth in membership in you know, the community itself? Are our young people staying here? Are we able to support our programs? I think we have a very big picture challenge, and we have to do a better job. So our goals of housing and jobs and social welfare all ties in together to make sure that Montgomery County is a place where we all have a future working together. And I think that's really what this campaign is about, because I think our current executive, the path that he wants to be on is a path of, frankly, stagnation and ultimately decline. And I think we need a much different vision for our future if we want to all have more opportunities for the next generation. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to you now, Ron, and let's
start the Q&A. Yeah, Hans, thank you very much. I appreciate your very articulate and purposeful, meaningful vision about where you think the county is going to go. I'm going to start. I have two questions, and then I'm going to give people a chance to go ahead and to please start putting their questions in the answer box. Now, folks, I'd rather have your questions than mine. So please go ahead and just, whatever it is. I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity. You have to speak one-on-one with the man who may be the next county executive, and he's here to take any questions you want. And he's very interested, and he's a lovable guy. Trust me. I wanted to ask you a question. You talked about how Montgomery County is not sustainable, right? You need to bring more jobs to the county. When this county was developed, even our transportation system was based on a north-south model with everybody, but over 60% of the people in Montgomery County work in Montgomery County now. In addition, we talk about we need more social services, we need more affordable housing, we need more of this. We are already paying some of the highest property taxes in the region. I know I look at my bill. And we also, when I go around the state, if I go to Rehoboth, I ask them how much money I need for the bags. And they're like, you don't pay for bags. I'm like, oh, right. So we've gotten to a point where I sometimes feel that residents want two things. They don't want to pay more nuisance fees, taxes, blah, 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 blah. But yet at the same time, they want the services that make this county great. So my question is, how do you raise revenue in an environment? Because there's not enough money. I mean, I know the county budget pretty well. There's not enough money to build 41,000 affordable housing units in one day. I mean, there's not enough money to us. How do you sell to people that we need to raise revenue, or how do you raise the revenue, which is obviously critical because it's what our taxpayer dollars that pay for good schools, good police, good fire, good good libraries that makes our county an attractive place to live. So how do you balance that act?
That's a great question. I have grappled with that challenge in a lot of ways over the past 12 years. And when I joined the council, we were experiencing the full impact of the Great Recession, which is, it has a somewhat delayed impact at the local government level. And so it was a hurricane hitting Montgomery County. And we had to make a lot of tough choices about sustainability and, ensuring that we were on a sound path. And those decisions paid off over the subsequent years. But, what I see, you need a county executive who, first of all, is going to make it a priority to find efficiency in county government, to do more with less. And one of my criticisms here of our incumbent, when he took office, he said he was going to figure out how not to add more positions to the county government, but how to reinvent what we do so that we can have more funds for community initiatives and not simply grow the size of the county payroll or workforce. And what has happened is really the opposite of that. We've added some 500-600 positions to county government, and there has not been pressure to rethink and become more efficient and to do more with less. And I think you've got to create that culture, and you need managers in the county government who can really drive efficiency and innovation within the departments to do more with less and to constantly reinvent our processes and use technology more effectively. All of those things have to fit together so that you can grow your services to the community within your existing tax structure. And that is possible in Montgomery County. We are fortunate to have income tax revenue to the county government. I can't name the number of local governments in this country that have income tax revenue. Very few. And so, that's a special opportunity for us, but we've got to deliver on that for the community. So just being mindful, 2 years ago, we got a budget from the county executive that had a property tax increase in it. And it was at the beginning of the pandemic. And we said, hey, we're entering a potential crisis here. We could be facing a significant economic impact. We need a new budget without a property tax increase. And he refused. And so the county council had to undo it and make some tough choices. And I'm glad we did, because his property tax was auspiciously for schools. And then, he ensured the schools were shut down for 2 years. So would have been very unfortunate if we had had a property tax going into education where kids were not really getting an adequate education in the subsequent school years.
Let me ask you one more question. I see people are beginning to privately send me questions. So I grew up in New York City and left when I was 26 to go to Georgetown to graduate school, and I've lived in Montgomery County, and I'm 53. So I spent about half my life in Montgomery County and about half my life in Brooklyn, New York. And I was involved in politics down there for some guy named Schumer. I don't know whatever happened to him, but so the question that and I've seen, I know what it is to grow up in an urban area where there's large crime rates. And I know when I was a kid, my mom would say, you have to keep $5 in your wallet because if you're ever held up, you need to be able to give them something or they're going to hurt you. I've heard similar things said to me by people who have grown up who are in Silver Spring in Germantown, that they're concerned about the high rising of crime. We know for a fact, it's empirical data, when you hire more police and you flood zones with police, crime goes down. We also know that members of our minority communities are suffering by in Montgomery County. It happens here too. We've seen enough video with discrimination, and JCRC wrote a police reform policy to help manage so that minority communities, Black and brown communities, and others are not victims of police violence, and that police are sensitized. How do we simultaneously increase police, deal with the issues of crime, because we can't even fill our class right now. Nobody wants to be a cop right now in Montgomery County. I speak to the cops at my synagogue and other synagogues, and they're demoralized. Nobody wants to be a police officer right now. 75% of them are eligible for retirement, right? We're having a crisis. We're not gonna have enough cops, which means if we don't have enough cops, we're not gonna be safe. We're not gonna be safe. We're gonna have a county nobody wants to live in. How do you balance the need for more police, back them up, give them, and at the same time, make sure that those police officers on our street are sensitive to the needs of our community, because we don't want to become one of those counties that's constantly showing videotapes of officers mistreating members. How do we balance police reform, police enforcement, and racial equity?
Thank you.
At the same time.
Thank you so much for that.
I cannot be one of those people who says we can only do one or the other.
No, exactly.
We must do both. And
I'm grateful that you asked that way, because I hope what you'll see in my candidacy is a person who approaches everything with, we can do both. I've worked on behalf of young people and seniors. I have strategies for economic growth and climate action. I believe deeply that we need effective policing and policing reform. We need them both. And, at a personal level, I experience both sides of this as well. Not too long ago, I took my youngest son for ice cream at night in downtown Silver Spring. And that week there had been a shooting. I think really what is called a drive-by shooting on Georgia Avenue. And it really, that got under my skin. And as I sat there with my kid about 9:30 eating ice cream, I thought, I don't actually feel safe in this location right now, even though there was really no one, it was fine, but I didn't feel safe. And it was the first time I've ever not felt safe in downtown Silver Spring. And I think the executive has an obligation and has not fulfilled an effective program for managing the downtown Silver Spring area and Germantown. There are areas around the county that need effective police presence, and they need stronger community partnerships and more enforcement of issues like late night hours in establishments. There's all kinds of tools that are at our disposal, and we know that we've got to be able to recruit more people into this profession. And I really believe that recruiting more people into the profession of being a police officer, the path to do that is to fix many of the issues that have created challenges in the community. And right now, what we're experiencing is tremendous conflict over police work. And I think there are a lot of communities that have really are lacking in trust. And
yeah, but Hans, how do you, when I speak to police officers, and they and a lot of them, they're very concerned. I'll be honest. They've all mentioned about the current county executive, whom I'm friends with. They say he doesn't back us up, and every big city urban area mayor who has, the Republican or Democrat, who has had some success with the police or has their support, their first reaction is always to be, we want to wait to get the results we want to get and see, we want to do an investigation first before we draw any conclusions. At the other time, you see an African-American woman being dragged from her car and handcuffed for no reason. So I'm just thinking, when you're in a situation like that, how do you maintain the support of the police and at the same time do justice? Because we have a very progressive county. Nobody here wants what has happened in other parts of the county to become emblematic of our county. We don't want to be known. I mean, I'm a proud Montgomery County resident. I mean, I love where I live, and I've chosen to have where my wife and I have chosen to raise our children. I want my kids to stay here. Like you, I want my grandchildren to stay here. You're in the executive office, and incident like how do you reassure everybody that we're good? How do you give the cops what they need? And how do you give the public what they need? Because they're almost diametrically opposed.
Well, they don't have to be. I think that's the critical thing. We have to create a culture in our police department that embraces change and that embraces reform. And I think that's possible if we recruit more women to be police officers, if we recruit more people who are from Montgomery County to be police officers here. This past weekend, I was with my friend Rob Bindeman, who I think may be on the call, and we were helping marshal a community event to raise funds for a terrible childhood disease. And we had a chance to talk for quite a time with a police officer in the traffic enforcement division. And we were hearing about the tools that they need, the technology that they need, that they just aren't getting from the police department. And I think that we could do a far better job supporting the officers in helping them do their jobs, ensuring that they're not sitting there saying, why can't I get the uniform that I need for my work? Why doesn't my laptop, do the job that it needs to do? So there's a lot of basic things that I think we can get right.
Yeah. By the way, one thing we can do is pay for their dry cleaning. They shouldn't have to pay to dry clean their own uniforms.
Possibly. So, we can, I think, deliver on both. But as I mentioned, I've got concerns on safety. I've also got a teenager who loves to run around downtown Silver Spring. I want him to be safe from crime, and I want to be confident that anytime that he wouldn't be victimized by someone falsely reporting a group of kids walking around wearing a hoodie, and then he ends up in a violent altercation unpredictably. Those are issues. It's on both sides here. So I think we have to build stronger community partnerships, focus on prevention programs, more youth sports, things that will help keep kids, out of bad situations. We have to invest in the management of our police department. There's a lot of studies that show effective management of police departments reduces crime significantly. I think our county executive is always taking the side of the police union. It doesn't side with police management. I think we need an executive who's going to back management to run the department effectively. And we've got to, make sure that the officers have the tools that they need at the ground level. And I think you put all those things together with good policies. But again, you've got to deal with the police union. We put in policies to limit use of force so that certain types of chokeholds and things like that wouldn't be used by the officers. Police union tries to bargain that and water it down, takes it to court and challenges it, tries to get it thrown out in court. You got to have a county executive who's willing to, bargain effectively with the police union and stand up for the community. And I'll tell you, the incumbent we have has been, by their side instead of by the community side, year after year, and election after election. And I think we need a different approach.
So we're going to start now with some, and thank you, Hans. Those were purposely difficult questions, and I really appreciate your forthrightness, the honesty, and the intellect and the thought you put behind it. Ann Sloan says, I appreciate the issues you have supported during your career at the national and local levels. Pedestrian safety is a priority of mine at the local level, having observed a degradation of safety at the Montrose Road, Montrose Parkway corridors. I know I travel those every day to work. having a negative impact on local residents, nonprofit employees, school children and seniors, and those who attend recreation, schools, and religious facilities on Montgomery County Road. So I think what she's trying to say is, and if I'm not summarizing correctly, is that there's a lot of people who are crossing the streets around there, and it's a highly traveled corridor. And how do you balance priorities to include pedestrian safety? If I'm not asking your question, and please pop on and clarify, but that's what I'm getting from your question.
That's it.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we lost a student on Montrose Road. He was struck, and we have a lot of roads in this county that were built and designed for high-speed vehicle travel. And what we have now today in a less suburban and more complex community is we have people who live alongside those roads, and they have to get from one side to the other. You have to park on one street and you have to walk to the other side of the street. And yet the roads are still designed for high-speed vehicle travel, and they've become very dangerous. And just yesterday, we had a bicyclist killed on Old Georgetown Road, which is a road that I have been seeking the state to change in its configuration for a long time. And the state has been too slow to look at how to redesign state highways in the county. So pedestrian safety has been one of my top transportation policy goals. And if you look into our capital budget today, you'll see significant programs now that are investing millions of dollars annually in rebuilding our roads to be safer. Wider sidewalks, protected crossings, longer times to get across the street. So we're actually investing significant capital dollars in making areas around transit more walkable and safe. We've also changed our development rules. So when new development goes in, instead of only thinking about how to get cars in and out, now development has to think about how are people going to walk to your building from the nearest bus stop or metro station? How long of a street crossing do they have to get across the street? How can you provide a shuttle service instead, to the metro, instead of expecting everyone will drive? So we're trying to change the culture in private development, as well as building the public infrastructure that we need. And I think over the long term, as we see more people are working from home, this is an example of the kind of infrastructure solution that we really have to prioritize. And it has always been one of my top goals to move the needle on that. And I think we've been able to make a lot of progress. So whether it's putting funding in for sidewalks in the neighborhood or rebuilding major roads, it all fits together, but it's got to be a bigger priority. And personally, for me, it certainly is.
Well, I also want to thank you for the work you put in. I know you were very helpful in getting us the funds that we needed for the Kent Mill feasibility study so that we could ensure that there would be a walkway, because a lot of people who commute right now between one side of the forest to get to the synagogue have to go through this terrible a tree laden area. And I know that you helped put us money in the budget to help us study that. So I do appreciate that. Lisa, do you want me to ask your question, or do you want to ask it directly since I see you? Lisa Klein.
Hi, I'm happy to.
Please, go ahead.
Good morning, Councilmember Riemer.
Hi, Lisa.
How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Good. I want to thank you I didn't realize you had been serving the county for so long. So thank you for that. I know it's.
We both look young at one point.
Especially tiresome lately. As you can imagine, my question is around ZTA 1907, which allowed cell towers closer to homes. I have a new tower, a newly amped up tower that is right over there at eye level from my home office. It has been like pulling teeth to get an RF report, a radiation report out of DPS. I finally got it, and they only measured at ground level, which doesn't help me a whole lot because I'm up here on a second story. ZTA 1907 removed the public notice and public process out of dotting the landscape with cell towers. So my question, without getting into the finer points about ZTA and 1907, how it is what it is, because it is, My question for you is, as county executive, would you be the kind of county executive to change your mind, improve upon legislation if you see that it's not working well, and to go back in time to say, you know what, maybe we could do better. Let's try again.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Certainly respect your advocacy on these issues over many years. And I know it's very personal for you. And I
Okay, you bring the lawnmower in.
really,
I'm ready to go.
Good, and I'll be ready too. I'm
Well,
ready.
get up and.
Can somebody please turn off your audio?
and I appreciate that. And of course, I always rethink my views based on changing information. And I think an elected official who sticks to a point of view despite the facts is something that we see far too often, especially in our national politics. And I think if you know, those who know me personally know that I am always reevaluating all the time. And that's just it's a mindset for me. As for specifics about the legislation, you know, what we have done in Montgomery County is equalize our rules with other jurisdictions like DC and Virginia and Howard County and Baltimore, Prince George's County, so that we are not left out of the next generation of wireless infrastructure. And what the next generation of wireless infrastructure does is it brings small antennas, almost like a Wi-Fi router, a little bit bigger, and it puts them on telephone poles. And those antennas are going to create very powerful networks that will allow us to have, you know, much more effective devices. And you know, I don't think we want to be left out of the next generation of wireless connectivity. And so our rules are a little bit more restrictive than other jurisdictions around us. So, you know, I don't think that we have in any way gone beyond what other jurisdictions are doing. It actually done a little bit less. And nevertheless, you know, if I don't know how we have a chance to, you know, compete for technology jobs if we're not facing in the right direction on core technology issues like wireless connectivity. And I think these are the kind of things that really bedevil Montgomery County and make it a tough place to do business. If you can't get the same kind of wireless coverage in Montgomery County as you can get in Fairfax or DC or Howard, you know, that's going to have an impact on our future. So if there were ever studies that made a persuasive case around health impacts from our mobile devices, you know, that will be a national level issue, and we will hear very clear, you know, what the NIH has to say and the FDA has to say, and we'll wait for that to, you know, consider what those rules might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Alex, I see your hand up. If you can please put your question in the box. I have like 4 questions ahead of you. I'm sorry. So we've got like 15 minutes, and I'm going to bang out like 4 or 5 questions, Hans. And Miriam, do you want me to ask your question, or do you want to ask directly?
Sure. My question is 2 parts. In deciding who to vote for, I always look at the record of the person, the candidate. And so my question was, what have you, while being a council member, initiated in 2 areas? One, affordable housing, and second, that important question that Ron asked about doing more with less, so that you can manage to make improvements without increasing taxes. Thank you. And by the way, thank you for coming here, and I appreciate this talk.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gelston. Really appreciate it. Let me focus here on affordable housing because I chair the council's housing committee, and I think we have made significant progress at the council over the past 3.5 years, and we've done it almost every time over the opposition or with the great resistance from our county executive. I'll start with lifting our housing moratorium. We actually had a moratorium on new housing in many parts of the county, particularly where the private sector wanted to invest. And we lifted that policy so that we could get more housing. And when we get more housing, we get more affordable housing because we have a requirement that all development provide affordable units to the county. So, for example, in downtown Bethesda, there's been 1,800 new housing units, but that includes almost 300 units provided into our county's long-term affordable housing programs that nonprofit organizations like the Jewish Foundation for Group Homes will be able to get access to and have clients living in downtown Bethesda that previously was not possible. So, I have voted and helped craft many master plans that our county executive has opposed to ensure that we have an effective model for future housing in the county, including affordable housing. I proposed an initiative that we got passed through the county council over the opposition of the executive called accessory dwelling units. These are your backyard apartments and your basement apartments and backyard cottages. And that's a great solution. It's one of the only ways to get more housing and that's really quite affordable into an existing neighborhood, is to allow homeowners to convert a basement into an apartment and then rent it out either to an adult child, perhaps even an adult child with disabilities, or just a tenant helping people age in place. It's a great solution.
A lot of people want to do that, but the county restriction on making sure that you have a window available and for lower dwelling units makes, I know a lot of people in the Kentlands and Lakelands would like, which is the area where I used to live, now I'm in Germantown, would like to convert their basements into apartments. But the county, and that's possibly an area without compromising safety where maybe there could be some sort of partnership, because I think you're right. If you take existing structures and you're able to convert them into affordable housing right away, you don't have to build anything. You have to modify a window and all of a sudden you increase the inventory.
Another key thing that I, working with my colleagues, have brought to the county, we created a $100 million fund now that is a loan fund for our Housing Opportunities Commission to construct new mixed income housing. So Housing Opportunities Commission is our public housing authority. It's the agency that, in other communities you would call Section 8 or public housing. We have a very different, unique, and powerful model here where that agency is now building mixed income housing. And it is able to use the rental income from the market housing to offset or provide the subsidy for the below market housing. So what we have done, I propose creating a fund. First, we added $50 million. This year's budget, we added a second $50 million. It's now $100 million that they use to get low-cost loans for their construction. And we expect that they are going to be able to make a significant dent in our housing shortage, building not only more housing generally, but more affordable housing, even for the very lowest income clients, because as a federally chartered public housing authority, they're obligated to serve the neediest among us and have very, very steeply discounted rent. So that's another initiative that I help bring to the county. And I have been working to create a preservation fund for the Purple Line corridor. And I believe the Purple Line is like an amazing opportunity for Montgomery County, connects the University of Maryland to Silver Spring, Bethesda, but there's a lot of affordable housing along that corridor that we have to ensure will be affordable over the long term. So my vision is to create a $100 million fund. This is really a community-driven vision to purchase those buildings and then help transfer them to nonprofits that will own them and ultimately redevelop them. And I appreciate we've made progress. We've got about $40 million towards that $100 million now established. And I think I can definitely get us to 100 as county executive. So those are some of the initiatives that I've worked on, whether it's affordable housing in existing neighborhoods through accessory dwelling units, financing for nonprofit housing, zoning to allow the private sector to help meet our housing shortage. All those things have to work together. So thank you. As far as the general issue of doing more with less, I think what I have tried to do is put pressure on the executive branch to meet our fiscal goals. Just this year, for example, county executive proposed spending $20 million out of our retiree health fund on current operating expenses. And that funding was really, our county policy did not support spending those funds. They were supposed to continue to be set aside for the future. And so the council devised a strategy to basically put that money back in and fund our priorities without relying upon it. So those kinds of things will create more fiscal pressure to do more with less within the existing budget framework. But, ultimately the proposal, and of course, as I mentioned, not approving the tax increase 2 years ago, I think very important. But, a lot of that is executive initiative. You need the executive to take the lead on reform within the agencies. It's not really as much of a council function.
Isaac, I apologize. I'm sorry, you just said thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Isaac, would you like to ask your question directly?
Sure, I'll also be short because I know time is important here. Good morning. Just wanted to ask, and you kind of put in some of the answers here in your last answer just now, but was just curious if there's any kind of agenda while on the council that you've championed that you'd like to expand on as executive, or even better, is there something you'd like to highlight with us now that maybe you have championed and got rebuffed either by your fellow council members or by the executive that you'd like to expand on as once you're in the executive seat?
Great
Kind
question.
of giving you the floor for that one.
I love that. Well, I'll try to answer two topics here that,
Hey, Hans, since we only have a few minutes, I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you, I'd like to get as many questions as possible.
Yep. I'll
So
be as
just keep
quick
that in
as I
mind.
can.
Yeah.
Right, great. First of all, I want to do a lot more around after-school programming for our kids. I think we have to have affordable after-school options, sports, and other programs that have an academic component too. For any child in this county, any family needs to have an affordable option. And I have been at the forefront of adding resources to our recreation department for nonprofits and for county provided services, but I think we got a long ways to go. And as county executive, that's going to be one of my top priorities, is meeting the mental health needs of our kids, supporting our families with universal options for affordable options for quality after school activities, all the way up through through high school. Secondly, on a major issue where I did not meet the success that I wanted is around climate. I proposed several years ago that we allow property owners in the agricultural zone to install solar on the ground, as long as they continue to conduct agriculture beneath the solar arrays. And I highlighted a best practice, which is to plant vegetation that sheep like to graze. And you can actually have solar arrays where sheep graze the ground beneath its pasture land. And I thought, that's agriculture. That's also solar. And the plan that we put forward would have only had about 1,800 acres of our 100,000 acre agricultural area, but it would have generated enough solar for 50,000 homes in Montgomery County. That's like a huge amount of homes. Well, county executive and a number of people, really fought hard against that plan. I worked closely with environmental activists, but he fought hard against that plan because some people don't want to see solar, out their window. Some people felt like, oh, this could displace agriculture. It wasn't going to displace agriculture because agriculture was required. The recent UN report on climate, the IPCC report, specifically highlighted blending agriculture and solar and said that this will help solve both problems, making agriculture sustainable, creating affordable solar options. So as county executive, I want to get back to that, get it right, and help deliver solar power for tens of thousands of homes in Montgomery County. Ron?
Okay, I'm going to exercise my prerogative as the moderator to try and group questions together and get them done. Can everybody give an extra 5 minutes so we can get it done? I promise, no more than 5. I like to run succinct phone calls. Robert Binderman says, why not David Blair? The Post seemed to take issue with his community effort. He seems to advocate for all the policies you passed and Mark voted against. You passed and Mark voted against as a council member. Does having a ton of personal money make him a good CE candidate?
Thank you so much for that question. There was a very interesting piece in the Washington Post 2 weeks ago about Mr. Blair's, community engagement. And, he has certainly been a philanthropist, and I think we're all appreciative of that, but, hasn't really been able to make progress on the issues that he identified as ones that he wanted to, deliver on. And I thought that was very interesting. He talks about bold leadership and being able to do things that government can't do, but, in his own efforts, hasn't been able to deliver successes. I don't think that having just a corporate CEO's background, is sufficient. I mean, it's not a bad qualification, but what you need is elected officials that have worked on behalf of all of our communities and know all of our communities. And when issues arise, there's a context for that person because they've worked with that community previously. And I bring that to the table, having been on the council now for more than 10 years, representing the whole county, knowing all of our communities and the nuances and the complexities. I can come into office with a personal experience that you just can't match. You need to be able to do that work in order to have that asset, as part of your leadership. And I don't think that, just being in the private sector and providing financial support replicates that. I think we need a county executive who has a deeper level of experience and can ensure that this county is working on behalf of everyone. Thank you.
Right. I'm going to combine two questions. Richard Friedman says, you have championed the expansion of pre-K education in the county. What would you do as the county executive to improve education at the primary and secondary level? In particular, proposals to redraw school boundaries elicit resistance from residents of how can you improve the quality of education at our less successful schools so we don't have to fight unproductive battles over boundaries? And then the second question is, I don't know if you need to write that down, is how do Harvey Ryder, our past president, asks, can you talk about the budget and public confidence challenges in getting more people to ride on public transit in a COVID environment? So you got the schools, you got transit, go.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. It's good to hear from you. First of all, on schools, over the past several years, what has happened is that every inequality has just been exploded. And kids, some kids did okay during COVID. Most kids were not learning enough. They were not learning what they were supposed to be learning. And, we have to essentially create more learning. We have to cause students to learn more. And that happens through educators. We need more people hands-on with our students now. And we need to have a crisis recovery mindset and strategy. I'm a big believer in tutoring. I enroll our children in supplemental math programming and Spanish. Those are challenging subjects. I think every kid in our county school system needs to have access to a consistent relationship with educators. They don't necessarily have to be, credentialed teachers. They could be college students. It depends. It could be volunteers. They could be, seniors. But it needs to be a consistent relationship and an intensive amount of tutoring. An hour a day, 2 hours, a day. I think if we can bring that kind of community strategy and educational strategy to bear, more adults in the classroom, more support outside the classroom, I think we can help our kids recover. And I think that is a model that can be sustained in the future for kids who don't have the same kind of resources. And I volunteer my own family's approach with tutoring, knowing that we're able to provide our kids with a lot more support than maybe many families are. And I think we've got to be able to have that in mind as we go forward. So I think the long-term tutoring should be an enduring strategy for the county to ensure that every child has access to everything that this community has to offer. As far as public transportation, I will say one of the surprises of the shift to remote work has been, rather than reducing driving, it has reduced transit. And that's because many people had a transit habit, and then COVID, they broke it. And now they're saying, well, I'm only going to work in person 1 or 2 days a week. I'll just drive. And that's a understandable, approach here. But we've got to first and foremost convince folks that it's safe. It has to be safe. And, that means, I think, strong encouragement for continued masking, mask only opportunities on the buses, in transit. It has to be reliable. You've got to know that there's going to be a metro every 10 minutes, or that on certain corridors, there's going to be a bus every 10 minutes. I was proud to lead the effort to ensure that we had free fares permanently for seniors and for people with disabilities. And we'd already done that with kids. So we have now provided free fares for some of the most vulnerable populations in the county. I think we got to focus on service. You know, you have to know that if you go out to that bus stop, you're not going to be standing there for a half an hour. I think that is the key that stops many people from using bus or all forms of transit. And so we got to get our services up to a level that is predictable and reliable. And I think that's a long-term strategy, but it's one I'm really committed to.
Hans, one thing, so we have a few other questions, but time is now, we have to close down the call. Is there an email address where people can send you their questions where you or your staff can respond to them?
Thank you so much. It is my name at gmail.com, hansriemer@gmail.com. And if you send an email there, I will engage my campaign staff if it is purely a official function, I'll forward it over to my legislative staff. But yeah, please email me there and I would be delighted to hear from you.
Okay, and second, some of you want, I've already gotten 2 questions have asked, where will this be available? Like if you want to view this again, if you go to YouTube and type JCRC of Greater Washington, this will be up as all of our conversations have been with all forums up. Give us a day or so and it'll be up on our YouTube. In the meantime, Hans, I thank you for giving us an hour of your time. I know that this is, what are we, 44 days out, but who's counting or something, 45, 44 days of election. I wish you lots of meditation during the next 44 days. I welcome the fact that, like all candidates, you're willing to put yourself forward to provide leadership of the county. That's a very strong, not only financial decision, but a family decision. And I want to thank you for sharing, and I thank you for your past support of our initiatives. Thank you for giving us your time today, and wish you the best of luck as I can in a nonpartisan way in all of your future endeavors. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
It's such a privilege to be able to work with you. It's an honor and I'm grateful. And thank you for giving me a chance to serve the community. I really appreciate that.